The last two nights of this show, we broadcast from Louisiana, from New Orleans on the banks of the Mississippi, and from Venice in Plaquemines Parish, 2 hours south of New Orleans, at the place where water and land get confused, where the mouth of the Mississippi and the marshes and the Gulf hang out and negotiate and mix, as the federal government, the Coast Guard, and BP keep trying unsuccessfully to cap the well that continues to gush an estimated 5,000 barrels of oil every day into the Gulf. Weather patterns appear to have held the resulting mass of waterborne oil offshore, for the most part, for the moment. The people of Plaquemines Parish are taking no chances, planning locally to deploy secondary absorbent booms in openings between fingers of marsh to help keep oil out of interior wetlands and waterways. They've recruited local fishermen to try to lay down what they think will be the shore's last line of defense. Why is that so important to keep the oil offshore? Well, consider this. The spill from the Exxon Valdez that came ashore in Prince William Sound in Alaska is still not over. That spill came ashore 21 years ago. That spill of over 11 million gallons affected 1,200 miles of Alaska coastline. It killed more than 35,000 birds, 1,000 sea otters, 250 bald eagles, 22 killer whales, billions of salmon and herring eggs. And that accounting of the carnage does not include the carcasses that sank to the seabed. Today, researchers have found that oil from the Exxon Valdez spill 21 years ago is still now being ingested by Alaskan wildlife, like sea otters and ducks. They've tested beaches where oil is still in the sand. According to the Associated Press this week, oil a few inches below the surface remains. These are current pictures. Students on field trips to islands in Prince William Sound that were devastated by the spill often uncover rocks soiled in oil with little effort. Again, the spill happened in 1989. That's the environmental impact, still resonating 21 years later. Now consider the economic impact. Like BP today, Exxon said it would compensate Alaska fishermen and landowners devastated by the Valdez spill. The total package was going to be $2.5 billion. The Supreme Court cut that number by 80%, down to just over $500 million many years later in 2008, while people were still waiting for that promised money. A good proportion of the people whose lives and livelihoods were ruined by Exxon's disaster died before they saw even a pittance in compensation. Exxon, of course, went on in 2005 and 2008 to set records for the all-time highest quarterly profits ever earned by any American company ever in the whole history of this country. While the company paid fishermen who lost their careers because of Exxon pennies on the dollar, if anything, 20 years later. And while sand in Alaska still weeps Exxon oil today, more than 20 years after Exxon spilled it there. Shareholders are doing great, though. Good for them. Looking back at the Valdez spill, looking warily at the future of the Deepwater Horizons disaster, what seems clear is that landfall by a giant oil slick on environmentally sensitive shorelines is the end. I mean, recovery is a euphemism once the land is coated in sticky, toxic, undegrading petrosludge. If and when it hits land, there will be efforts to clean the shore. But even the worst apologists for this disaster admit that once that delicate, fecund land has been sludged, there's not much to say about the future of that land in any of our lifetimes. I had the privilege this week to be in Louisiana covering the story. I want to thank MSNBC, actually, for paying to send me and a crew down there. You guys did not have to do that. Thanks, you guys, upstairs. But I want to leave you with this one observation. I talked to a ton of people in Louisiana, all with different connections to the disaster in the Gulf. And the answer to almost every question I asked anyone was the same. The answer, no matter what I asked, was, we got to cap that well. I'd ask, do we know how to do that? And the answer would be, we got to cap that well. I'd ask, how do we deal with the worst case scenario here? The answer would be, we got to cap that well. I'd ask, what is the worst case scenario here? And the answer would be, long pause, we got to cap that well. Nobody seems to believe we can cap that well anytime soon. Everybody says we must cap that well. No one is willing to speculate what happens if we don't cap that well. If past is prologue, the only answer, the only acceptable answer is indeed to cap that well and to never, 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 never let this happen again.